Ryan and Melissa Carter were the kind of couple everyone admired, until a reality TV show exposed her affair, and within days, Ryan was pulling the trigger in their driveway, turning their perfect marriage into a national nightmare. Ryan and Melissa Carter lived in a peaceful, tree-lined neighborhood just outside Austin, Texas. Their house stood modestly among others, with a well-kept lawn, a white fence, and a front porch decorated with seasonal flowers. To outsiders, they seemed like the kind of couple you'd expect in a lifestyle magazine: stable, attractive, polite, and happy. Ryan, a high school history teacher, had a quiet charm. He loved books, barbecues, and Sunday football. Melissa, on the other hand, was outgoing and lively. She worked as a social media manager for a local fashion brand, and had recently started building her own following online, often posting carefully curated glimpses of her daily life. Her morning coffee, their home decor, or the occasional selfie with Ryan, captioned with affectionate emojis. To neighbors and coworkers, the Carters appeared to be in love. At community events, they always showed up hand in hand. Melissa's friends envied her seemingly perfect life: an attentive husband, a cozy home, and no children to interrupt their freedom. Ryan's colleagues admired how he spoke of Melissa, often with pride and tenderness. But what people didn't see were the small cracks forming beneath the surface. Melissa had started spending more time on her phone, her face lit by the glow of notifications late into the night. She started going out more often, sometimes with vague explanations about work dinners or last-minute meetings. Ryan noticed, of course, but each time he questioned her, she reassured him with a smile and a kiss on the cheek. Over time, that reassurance began to lose its power. Ryan started feeling like a stranger in his own marriage. Melissa's laughter no longer sounded familiar. Their conversations became shallow. She stopped asking about his day, and he stopped telling her. Still, he held on. He wanted to believe that stress or work or just time had come between them, and that things would get better. He loved her deeply, too deeply to imagine life without her. He often blamed himself for their growing distance. Maybe he was boring. Maybe he didn't dress well enough, or maybe he didn't make enough money. Melissa, with her charm and beauty, could have anyone. He feared he was slowly losing her but didn't know how to stop it. Then there were the absences. Sudden trips out of town for company retreats, phone calls, taken behind closed doors, texts she would quickly hide when he entered the room. One time, Ryan had tried to follow her, only to lose her in traffic. That moment stayed with him for days. He couldn't sleep. He started checking her social media, even searching for clues in the background of her photos. But Melissa was careful, too careful. It left him feeling paranoid and foolish. He didn't want to become the kind of man who spied on his wife. Yet the gut feeling remained. Something wasn't right. Ryan lived in that tension for months, torn between trusting the woman he married and facing the terrifying thought that the life he'd built was a lie. And just when he thought he might be imagining it all, a phone call shattered his denial completely. The call came on a cloudy Wednesday afternoon, while Ryan was grading papers at home. He didn't recognize the number, but answered anyway, thinking it might be a parent or a school administrator. On the other end was a calm, professional voice introducing herself as a producer from a reality television show called Exposed Affairs Live. Ryan had heard of the show in passing. He'd seen clips online, stories of cheating spouses caught through hidden cameras and investigative setups. He had never watched an episode himself. The idea had always seemed cruel, turning private heartbreak into public entertainment. But the producer wasn't calling to ask for his opinion. She was calling because someone had submitted Melissa's name. At first, Ryan was stunned into silence. He asked her to repeat it, unsure if he had heard correctly. The producer explained that a woman named Claire, later revealed to be Eric's wife, had contacted the show with concerns that her husband was having an affair with Melissa. Claire had given the production team permission to investigate, and what they found was significant enough to warrant a full episode. The producer told Ryan that he had the right to be informed before the show aired and offered him early access to the footage. He hesitated. Every part of him wanted to hang up, to pretend the call never happened. But the other part, the part that had been quietly screaming for answers, agreed. That evening, Ryan sat at his laptop and opened the private link the show had sent him. As the video loaded, his heart pounded in his chest. The footage was clear and brutal. Melissa was shown meeting Eric at a hotel lobby, laughing, checking in under fake names. The timestamp on the video matched one of her company retreats. Other clips showed them at restaurants, sitting close in the dark corners of booths, holding hands under tables. There were audio recordings too, conversations recorded in public, where Melissa talked about Ryan dismissively, calling their marriage comfortable but boring. At one point she even told Eric she was planning to leave her husband after her next birthday. Ryan watched the entire episode in one sitting, barely breathing. The betrayal felt like a physical weight pressing down on him. Each smile she gave Eric was a knife to his heart. Every kiss, every embrace, every word spoken so casually about leaving him made Ryan feel smaller. He tried to pause the video, to look away, but his eyes were locked on the screen. It was like witnessing a different woman altogether. A version of Melissa he didn't recognize. The woman in the video wasn't his wife. She was a stranger. When the screen finally went black, Ryan sat motionless. The room felt cold. His mind raced with images and unanswered questions. How long had this been going on? Why hadn't he seen it sooner? Was their entire marriage built on a lie? But the most painful question of all was, what now? The truth was finally in front of him, raw and undeniable. But the devastation it left behind was only just beginning. The episode aired nationwide 2 days later, on a Friday evening. It was one of the most anticipated broadcasts of the season, heavily promoted on social media, with teaser clips and dramatic trailers. Viewers tuned in expecting scandal and entertainment. For Ryan, it was a night of silent dread. He didn't tell anyone he would be watching. He didn't prepare dinner. He didn't even turn on the lights. He sat alone in the dark living room, his hands shaking slightly as he held the remote. The episode opened with upbeat music and a host introducing the case of Melissa from Texas, a seemingly devoted wife, leading a double life. As the footage rolled, the smiling image of Melissa walking into a hotel lobby appeared on screen. The narrator's voice described her affair with Eric in meticulous detail, how they coordinated secret meetups during work hours, how they created fake email accounts to message each other, and how Eric's wife had grown suspicious after noticing his credit card charges. The episode laid it all out with cinematic flair. There were hidden cameras in restaurants, audio from phone calls, and even a dramatic confrontation clip where Claire, Eric's wife, called Melissa, pretending to be a client and secretly recorded their conversation. For the average viewer, it was scandalous entertainment, but for Ryan, it was a public execution of everything he had believed in. Each moment exposed not only Melissa's betrayal, but Ryan's vulnerability. The nation was watching what he had only just begun to process in private. People were tweeting reactions in real time. Hashtags with Melissa's name started trending. Memes were already being made before the episode had ended. Melissa had no idea the episode had aired. That night, she was out again, claiming to be attending a client dinner. Ryan didn't text her. He didn't call. He simply sat in the dark, numb. He watched as online comments flooded in. Some viewers expressed sympathy for Ryan, calling him the real victim. Others mocked him for being clueless. Strangers debated the morality of airing such private affairs on national TV. But Ryan didn't care about the viewers. He wasn't angry at the show. He was crushed by the reality it revealed. By the time Melissa returned home later that night, her face was already being circulated across the internet. Someone had tagged her Instagram. Her workplace had likely seen it. She walked through the door as if nothing had happened. Ryan watched her from across the room, his eyes hollow. He didn't speak. She looked at him, smiled faintly, and walked into the kitchen. The silence that followed was louder than any confrontation. He didn't ask questions. She didn't offer explanations, but she sensed something was wrong. That night, Ryan couldn't sleep. His thoughts looped in endless spirals. He replayed the footage over and over in his mind. The images of her with another man wouldn't fade. The woman he married had been unmasked in front of millions, and the worst part wasn't even the betrayal, it was the coldness in her eyes when she talked about leaving him, as if he had never mattered at all. The next morning, Ryan woke up before sunrise. He hadn't slept, only drifted in and out of restless thoughts through the night. The house felt different now, heavier, colder. Melissa was still asleep in the bedroom, unaware of just how much Ryan had changed since watching the episode. Something had broken inside him, something that couldn't be repaired. He moved through the house like a ghost, slowly, silently, unsure of what he was doing but feeling the pull of a decision forming in his mind. Later that day, he drove to a nearby gun shop. It was small, tucked between a gas station and a pawn shop, easy to overlook. He told the clerk he wanted a handgun for home protection. His voice was calm, his face showed no emotions. His background check came back clean, he had never had so much as a parking ticket. Within an hour, he left the shop with a legally purchased firearm and a box of ammunition. The weapon sat quietly on the passenger seat as he drove back home, the Texas sun glaring through the windshield. It was a normal day to the outside world, but in Ryan's mind, nothing would ever be normal again. Over the next 2 days, he didn't go to work. He told the school he needed personal time. Tidying, stress and family issues. His colleagues assumed he was just going through a rough patch. No one suspected what he was really going through. At home, Melissa continued to act as though everything was fine. She cooked dinner. She talked about her work as if nothing had changed. Ryan barely responded. He couldn't look at her for more than a few seconds without seeing the images from the show flashing in his mind. Her voice, once comforting, now felt like static in his ears. He started avoiding her completely, retreating into the garage or backyard for hours. He didn't want to hear her laugh. He didn't want to see her pretend. At night, he lay awake staring at the ceiling while she slept beside him. The gun was hidden in his closet, untouched, but always on his mind. He wasn't sure if he planned to use it. He only knew that every breath he took felt heavier than the last. Then on the 4th day after the show aired, Melissa began packing a suitcase. She said she needed space. She said she was going to her sister's house for a while. Ryan didn't answer. He just watched her fold clothes and zip up her bag like she was going on a casual weekend trip. No apology, no explanation, just silence and indifference. That was the moment everything inside him snapped. As Melissa walked out the front door with her bag slung over her shoulder, Ryan followed behind her. The sky was clear, the sun blinding. Birds chirped in the distance. Everything looked normal, almost peaceful, but inside Ryan, there was only noise, rage, sorrow, betrayal, and something darker he could no longer control. He reached into his jacket and wrapped his hand around the gun. A decision had been made. The sun was high in the sky, casting long shadows on the driveway as Melissa stepped outside with her suitcase. She wore sunglasses, her hair perfectly styled, dressed as if she were heading to a casual lunch rather than walking out on her marriage. She didn't look back, she didn't pause to say goodbye. To her it seemed like the end of a chapter she was ready to forget. But for Ryan, it was the moment everything came crashing down. As she opened the car door, Ryan stood a few feet behind her, staring at her with hollow eyes and a clenched jaw. Time slowed in his mind. Every memory rushed back at once. The wedding day, the first apartment they rented together, the nights they stayed up late talking about the future, all of it now felt like a cruel trick. In that instant, Ryan wasn't thinking clearly. His heart raced, his hands trembled. The pain had twisted into something else, something unrecognizable. A blur of emotion took over, and from inside his jacket, he pulled the gun he had bought just days earlier. The first shot rang out, echoing through the neighborhood like a thunderclap. Birds scattered from the trees. Neighbor watering his lawn froze in place. Melissa collapsed instantly, her body hitting the ground beside the open car door. Ryan didn't run. He stood still, the gun still in his hand, his face blank. There was no anger on his face, only emptiness. as though the last of him had disappeared with that shot. A second round followed seconds later, not out of rage, but because she moved slightly, groaning in pain. He couldn't bear to see her suffer, or perhaps he couldn't bear the idea that she might get up and walk away again. He fired again, and the world fell silent. By now neighbors had begun screaming, someone dialed 911. Another rushed inside their home, locking the door. The quiet suburban street had turned into the scene of a tragedy in mere moments. Police arrived within minutes. Ryan was still there, sitting on the lawn beside his front steps. He had placed the gun down beside him, his hands resting on his knees. His eyes were fixed on the horizon, as if watching something only he could see. When officers approached with caution, he didn't resist. He didn't speak. He simply nodded when they asked if he was armed. The moment was over. Everything he had been, the loving husband, the quiet teacher, the heartbroken man, was gone. Paramedics pronounced Melissa dead on the scene. A white sheet was pulled over her as flashing red and blue lights painted the quiet street. Reporters would arrive later. News vans would park near the cul-de-sac. Her face, already known from the TV episode, now appeared on news bulletins nationwide, this time as the victim of a murder. Ryan was led into the back of a police car without handcuffs. He didn't struggle. He didn't cry. In his silence, he seemed to accept that his life was over. Ryan's arrest made national headlines within hours. The story was too sensational to ignore. A husband murders his wife wise after her affair is exposed on a popular reality TV show. News anchors dissected every detail from the timeline of the betrayal to the final tragic moment in the driveway. Clips from exposed affairs live were replayed across social media platforms, now paired with headlines about murder and rage. Public interest in the case exploded. Some called it a crime of passion. Others blamed the show for pushing a fragile man over the edge. In the days following Melissa's death, the network behind the TV show faced harsh criticism. Advocacy groups accused them of exploiting real people for entertainment, arguing that turning infidelity into spectacle could have dangerous consequences. A petition to cancel the show gathered thousands of signatures within 48 hours. Under pressure, the producers pulled the episode featuring Melissa from their platforms and issued a brief statement expressing condolences to all parties affected. But for Ryan, none of that mattered anymore. He was already in custody, awaiting trial, alone in a cold jail cell with no visitors and no hope. During the trial, Ryan didn't deny what he had done. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. His lawyer tried to present his mental state as a factor, describing the emotional trauma caused by the public exposure, the breakdown of his marriage, and the rapid spiral that led to the shooting. But the court wasn't interested in justifications. The judge described the killing as an irreversible act of violence born from emotional failure, not legal excuse. Ryan was sentenced to 25 years in prison, with no chance of parole for the first. Melissa's funeral was small and tense. Her family was devastated, but much of the public response was divided. Some people sympathized with Ryan, labeling him as a victim of both betrayal and media manipulation. Others saw him as a murderer who chose violence instead of walking away. Eric, the man Melissa had been having an affair with, was never charged with any crime, but he lost his job, his marriage, and his privacy. He disappeared from public view shortly after the trial began. Rumors swirled online that he moved to another state under a new name. No one ever confirmed where he went. Years passed, the show was officially canceled, and the episode that triggered it all was never aired again. But for those involved, the scars never healed. Ryan, now in prison, spends most of his days in silence. He rarely speaks to other inmates. He reads a lot, mostly history books and biographies, and never talks about Melissa. During a rare prison interview, years later, he said only one sentence when asked if he regretted what he did. "If I had just walked away, we'd both be alive." In the quiet Texas suburb where it all happened, the house they once shared remains empty. The lawn has grown wild, the paint is peeling, and no one ever stays long when they move in. Locals call it cursed, a painful reminder of a love story that turned into a tragedy broadcast for the world to see.